Hey, what's going on, everyone? Okay. All right, cool. Okay, let me get a sip of my coffee here. All right, so we'll wait a little bit for people to jump in. Today we will be, let me bump up the sound a little bit. Today we'll be talking about Neil. Good to see you. Let me know what you got planned for the weekend. Saw someone else jumped in as well. We'll give it a little bit of time. Rajesh, let me know if I pronounced your name right. I always have trouble with some people's names. Neil, good to see you as well. Hope you guys are doing well. We'll be talking about today. We'll be talking about common stumbling blocks people have with their fat loss journey, and the myriad of ways they could get stuck and fail in that fat loss journey. So remember, fat loss, once you kind of know what to look for, is pretty easy. It's not that challenging to lose weight. I would say it's far more challenging to keep the weight off. And we'll be talking about various aspects of how to tackle that problem as well on the live as well. So, all right, cool. So let me bump that down, get my notes here. I always try to bring notes or I keep forgetting like what we need to talk about on these guys. So, okay. So let's rock and roll. All right, guys. So in terms of fat loss, obviously a lot of people, especially in especially in the U.S., struggle with a lot of excess weight gain. Right now, out of American adults, 9 out of 10 American adults are metabolically sick, and about 75% of Americans are either overweight or obese, with I think 30% being actually obese. And remember, for males, 20% is considered overweight, 25% and above is considered obese. To give you guys an idea, like here is my physique right here. You guys kind of see it. I'm around 13 or 14%, which is very lean looking. I'm not saying I'm ripped or lean or anything, or like super lean or anything, but just compared to the average person, I'm actually very lean and muscular, but it's not the case. But just because standards kind of generally have fallen so far, it's easy to see the contrast. Okay, so I'm going to go over various ways that a person gets stuck losing weight, and a lot of myths about weight loss as well on this live. So I'm going to actually add a thing or two, which is important. Let's see here. Thyroid. Okay. All right. So the main thing a lot of people get confused on, and it's very easy to understand. It's just basic physics. At the end of the day, is the reason a person gains too much weight. Rocky, good to see you. The reason a person gains too much weight is first and foremost, the simplest thing to consider is they're just eating too much for their particular body size plus activity level. If there's always like a caloric surplus, if you're always taking in more calories than you're burning, Randy, Mr. Shredder himself has jumped in. Good to see you. Hope all is well. But if you're taking in too many calories and you're in a caloric surplus, you'll always be gaining weight. And Robert, good to see you. Rocky as well. You'll always be gaining weight. And where this caloric surplus is varies from person to person. So obviously, if a person's like 200 pounds and extremely physically active, their caloric surplus is going to be way different than even another person that's, let's say, their equal twin that's also 200 pounds but not physically active as well. So the person that's not physically active will typically be able to have that caloric surplus with much more ease than a person that's, let's say, working out like 5 days a week, for example. So where it varies, where that caloric surplus is, once again, varies dramatically from person to person. There is no blanket statement or algorithm. But the general thing is if you are gaining weight, you are in a caloric surplus because your body can never gain weight in a caloric deficit, right? Your body can never gain body fat in a caloric deficit in particular. And if it could, that's great news because you can kind of basically, stop buying food because you'll never starve to death if your body actually gains weight or sustains its weight in a caloric deficit on a consistent enough basis. Or, if that's the case, you can go get lost in the forest, for example. I'm not suggesting you actually do that without any food, And you don't have to worry about anything because you'll never starve to death if your body can actually gain body fat in a caloric deficit for its weight, right? So the caloric deficit is really the main objective. And if you establish that caloric deficit, which once again varies from person to person, you will always be losing weight. You might need to adjust it, as your weight loss continues, for example, depending on your programming and genetics and physical activity level and commitment and your overall health, et cetera, et cetera. But the rule stands if you are in that deficit, no matter, how your hormonal health is doing or how your thyroid is functioning, you'll always be losing weight. And a good example, and I mean this in the most respectful way, is look at a lot of POWs. I'm pretty sure a lot of them had the quote unquote fat gene or not ideal health, etc. But they all became extremely thin and unhealthy looking, obviously, because they're malnourished. Thus, because they're in a caloric deficit, basically. Okay. Hey, Tim, how are you doing? Two of my favorite clients are in this live right now, Randy and Tim. They have great stories themselves. Especially I find Randy's story is amazing too, but Tim's story is beyond amazing in the sense that he was able to get off 9 medical drugs and lose 60 or 70 pounds, I forgot already at this point, during the peak of the whole virus pandemic kind of thing. We didn't have a gym. All he had was a pair of bands and the desire to finally stop normalizing pathology. I think that's huge, and he was still able to make it happen at age 60 on top of that, okay? So anyone on this live, just know the second you stop making it acceptable to normalize pathology, mental and physical pathology in your life, is the second it'll stop being normalized. So the point being is you need a caloric deficit to lose weight, period, on any diet. And a lot of times I hear people say, oh, my hormonal balance isn't well, or my thyroid isn't functioning well, or whatever. First of all, probably losing weight, it varies from person to person, probably just losing weight and not being overweight will improve those markers a tremendous amount and improve just all of your biological markers, your triglyceride levels, your insulin, cholesterol, etc., high blood pressure as well, especially if you're working out, all of that stuff, okay? So even if your hormonal balance is completely messed up and it's at the bottom of the chain, such as I spoke with him here last weekend, such as one of my former clients, Charlie, which lost 95 pounds at age 56, his testosterone was like at 150 or 200 nanograms per deciliter, as he mentioned, and he still was able to lose weight. And of course, his hormones were all over the place because he was just so overweight. He started at 275. And that was actually already after he lost like 30 or 40 pounds on his own. So really he started at about 300 or 310 pounds, somewhere around there. And he still, lost that 30 or 40 pounds on his own. Then another 95 pounds or so with me, even when his hormones weren't ideal, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the most important. That's the part people get confused often as well, where they sometimes, a very common one I get is like, oh, my thyroid isn't working well. I have an underperforming thyroid or stuff of that sort. And you might need to eat less to even be in that deficit, or work out even more. But nonetheless, if that deficit still exists, you will no doubt in my mind actually be losing weight. And the deficit, once again, varies from person to person. That's important to keep track of, to keep in mind. And a lot of the calculators online you have to be very careful with as well. They're a good ballpark estimate, but at the end of the day, when you just plug in your weight and your height and stuff of that sort, maybe even your activity level, that's still extremely vague. And they don't know, how hard you're working out, or what type of program you're on, or which portion of the periodized program you're on, or your goals overall. So it's really tough to give you an exact amount of calories to eat to be able to eat in a deficit. So the deficit is really the key. And if you're not losing weight, you're basically not in a caloric deficit. And that's it for your body type. And sometimes a lot of people get that confused because they're like, well, I'm eating as much as my friend. Well, your friend isn't you. Your needs are going to be dramatically different. And as I say often on these lives, nature is a novelty generator. So there isn't going to be the same of two people anywhere. It's not even the same of two leaves on the same exact tree, for example, or bush. So obviously your approach is going to be dramatically different from someone else that may have even the same goal. et cetera, et cetera. Especially when you consider the reason one person gained 20 pounds of weight could be dramatically different than the reason another person gained 20 pounds of weight. Thus, their programs and their approaches need to be different in the sense of how Walensky would say you need to meet the problem at the level of the problem, okay? So that's the first one, and that's the most common one people get confused on. They're just eating too much at the end of the day, and they're in a caloric surplus instead of a deficit. That is why they catch themselves gaining too much body fat. Of course, if your hormones are all messed up and you're not active and stuff of that sort, it's easy to get into that caloric surplus. But nonetheless, if you are in a deficit, your body cannot actually gain body fat in a deficit. And if you're not losing weight, you're just not in a deficit for whatever your body weight is or dimensions and your activity level. End of story, and that's it. Of course, there are some other things you can consider, such as the way you distribute your macros. They'll impact your body composition as you lose weight, which is important to consider as well, especially when you take in consideration your goals and activity levels. That will determine, how many carbohydrates you need, and also your starting place. That will determine how many carbohydrates, what percentage of fat should be coming from your total calories, and how much protein you should have to sustain your muscle mass while losing weight. That's also very important as well, because you have to be very careful with fat loss programs, especially as you get older in age, 30s and 40s, because you do risk the chance of losing a decent amount of muscle if you do it incorrectly, especially if your caloric deficit is too wide. Then on paper, on the scale, it does look impressive because the numbers are going down quite fast. But in reality, you'll probably be losing fat. You'll for sure will be losing excess water weight and glycogen storage as well. But you'll also risk the chance of losing quite a bit of muscle. And thus, the end product, how your physique will look, wouldn't be as great. And also, it'll just make it tougher for you once you finish a fat loss program to transition into a lifestyle program, because you would need to rebuild your base metabolism, which we'll touch on later, to help basically your body burn a lot of calories. Because if your base metabolism is pretty low because your muscle mass is pretty low, basically your only way to succeed is to maintain a lower calorie level consistently, which is not ideal for long-term weight loss strategies, okay? So macros and food choices are important to consider. Another big common problem I hear a lot of people say is, well, I'm eating healthy, and that is a huge red flag, because I almost guarantee it 90% of the time they totally are not eating healthy, simply because they wouldn't have the tremendous amount of health issues that the typical American would have today if they truly were eating healthy, and also in addition just working out a bit more and learning a bit more about central nervous system management and how to actually be a little bit happy in life and stuff of that sort. JP, good to see you. Tim, Brandy, good to see you guys as well. So healthy eating. Most people are definitely not eating healthy at all, especially if they eat out consistently or they're drinking and stuff of that sort, drinking alcohol that is, and stuff of that sort. But even if they are, healthy eating doesn't equate to fat loss. A lot of people get that confused. You could eat healthy in a caloric maintenance, and you could eat healthy in a caloric surplus. I actually eat healthy in a caloric surplus. For example, I almost rarely eat out. I'm talking about like maybe once every 3 weeks or stuff of that sort. Yep, Gary, good luck. I don't know what you're recovering from. Hopefully the injury isn't too great, but be very patient with the healing process and try not to rush it for sure. I've definitely been injured myself, so just take it easy. But I eat healthy in a caloric surplus, and I'm trying to gain weight. I'm currently about 203 in the morning or so, and I'm trying to work up to 210. It is a struggle because I have a high base metabolism, not because of my genetics, but moreover because I developed a lot of muscle over 20 years of consistent training. So I'm able to eat around 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day as a maintenance. okay, which has a lot of advantages and a few disadvantages. I'll touch on them later. Justin, good to see you. Hope all is well. So, you guys, just because you're eating healthy doesn't mean you will lose weight. And it's important to not get stuck in that. You can, for example, let's say, as a hypothesis or as just a random example, a person needs to eat 2,500 calories a day to lose weight, right? That puts them in a caloric deficit. We've determined that. Yep, Justin, good to see you as well. We determined that. But check this out. I could buy 2 pounds of legitimate 100% grass-fed and grass-finished steaks. That's already, 2,000 calories right there. And let's say I cook it with butter and put some oils on it or some, barbecue sauce or whatever. That's already easily surpassing 2,500 calories. And then, of course, I'm not going to be just eating that. Let's say also I have some, let's say, organic even jasmine white rice and some organic fruit, let's say 2 or 3 bananas. Well, I'm already, getting in about 3,000 to 3,500 calories, maybe even more, depending on what sauces and seasonings and oils you use, just right there. And it's all very healthy. But you can see I surpassed my caloric need of 2,500 calories by quite a bit. So I won't be losing weight. So don't get stuck in that trap of like, I'm eating healthy, thus I should be losing weight. Definitely not the case. Definitely not the case. Really just that caloric deficit is what's key. Okay, let me grab a drink of coffee here and then we'll continue. All right. Coffee's always organic. I'm not like a coffee master. I don't know the best brands, but I always try to at least buy USDA organic coffee and always drink it out of glass and never plastic. So another common mistake people fall into is unsustainable, trendy diets. And they do this mainly because it's very easy to understand. Like a lot of diets are like, for example, the carnivore diet. Just eat meat. It's easy for most people to understand, especially since most people are living in such a myopic and stressed out state these days, constantly on the go, maybe financially not doing too well, which definitely puts you in a high alert state. And they don't have time to really look into optimizing their diet for their specific needs. So they look for easy to understand ways of losing weight, and they kind of fall into these traps of these trendy diets, which are most often definitely not customizable to you, and definitely most often not sustainable also. So, like the carnivore diets, like eat nothing but meat and maybe some fruit. It's easy to understand for most people, so they kind of fall into this because once again, they don't have enough time. They're just so exhausted and so stressed out, most people, that they don't have enough time to really learn what proper nutrition is and commit to those proper nutrition protocols that are specifically customized to them. Especially with people with digestive issues, they for sure should at least get like a GI map test done to see what is going on with their gut microbiome, to be able to customize a nutrition protocol to heal their gut first, and then kind of build a proper nutrition protocol on how to sustain their muscle mass or whatever they're trying to accomplish from there, or just be healthy. But trendy diets, also keto, what else you got over there? Paleo, the juice diet, fasting. People always fall into these because they're easy to understand. And if they do happen to work for weight loss, they're only literally working because they put you in a deficit by eliminating a tremendous amount of exposure to different foods, right? So if you're fasting, you're eating, your window of opportunity to eat is much more narrow, so you're more likely to eat less. The same thing with like a carnivore diet, all of a sudden you eliminated all grains, beans, lentils, hopefully processed foods as well. And of course, those are very calorically rich foods most of the time, and you're more likely to be in a caloric deficit, does lose weight. That's really the secret to all of these diets, is they put you in a deficit. But once again, the best way to approach dieting is to educate yourself on what proper nutrition is. And once you do that, you will see it always falls back to some type of omnivore type diet, some type of mixed diet of fats, carbs, and proteins with rich variety that match your specific needs. So if you're super skinny and super physically active, a high carbohydrate diet would work for you really well. Also getting in the adequate protein, and the adequate fats as well. But if you're very overweight already and your body fat percentage, let's say, is exceeding 20%, you don't have to overload on carbs so much. But once again, even if you decide to, if you're in that deficit, you will still lose weight. But the way you structure those macros, the fats, carbs, and proteins, will determine also how your body composition looks and how you feel doing a specific journey. But like I always tell you guys, even with my information, you can't listen to people online. You just can't do it, because like I see a bunch of you here, and I never met any of you except for the few clients of mine here, obviously. Okay, so if I never met you, how could I give you advice personally? It's the same as, think about it. If you show up to a doctor's office and they don't never even seen you or talk to you, and they're like, here, take these medical drugs, you're like, well, you don't even know what's going on with me. It's the same thing with online advice. When you go on there, even if the person is actually competent, which some of them are, most of them are bogus for sure, they just never met you at the end of the day. So thus, they can't really honestly give you advice, especially when it relates to nutrition, because it needs to be so customizable to your needs. And if you fall into these trendy diet fads, they might give you some short-term success, but I guarantee you, long-term, very likely to fail, extremely likely to fail. I'd say if you look at all fat loss programs, 95% of people that end up losing weight regain it within 2 to 3 years. 95%, which is crazy. At that point, it's like there's no point of really even starting the fat loss process, especially when you have to consider the reason for these failures is because people just changed their diet and just changed their workout, which isn't going to be enough to produce lasting change, because you're still falling into loops of symptom management. You're just managing those symptoms with exercise. You're managing the symptom of excess fat gain, which is a symptom, with exercise and diet, which is a symptom management approach. It's better than like medical drugs, for example, but it will not produce lasting change in the bulk majority of people. There are no absolutes. There are some exceptions to this, but in the bulk majority of cases, statistics will side with me that 95% of people that approach it from, I just have to change my diet and I just have to work out more, 95% failure rate from that approach. It's the same as a person that has an alcohol problem and you just tell them to stop drinking, Obviously, they do need to stop drinking. That's obvious. You don't need to freaking be a master in psychology to understand that. But there are a myriad of reasons in their life, internal and external, that has led to that drinking problem that need to be addressed with sufficient intensity and probably all at once to really come to a complete resolution of that drinking problem. It's the same with fat gain. It's very rarely just because the person doesn't know what to eat or doesn't know how to work out and stuff of that sort. So important to remember that these fat kind of very popular diets, they're easy to understand. That's why people fall into the traps. But the best results and the results that will provide you with long-term sustainability will always come through individualized programs. And what I mean by that is, if you want it to be individualized, you really have to be very crystal clear on your goals, your current starting position. I do this actually twice a year, get a GI map test done. You can find a practitioner online. I actually do it with pretty much a lot of my clients. And it'll give you a good overview of your gut microbiome, and then you'll be able to take a look at your goals, take a look at what your gut can handle and what kind of deficiencies it has, and then customize a proper plan for you. You could for sure become your own mechanic and learn how to do this, but just know it's not going to happen from just following people online or just reading just random Yahoo articles online. You're going to have to really be invested in it if you want to become your own mechanic. So start with reading 2 to 3 books a month on the topic of what you're trying to accomplish. Go to health courses. That's huge as well. Find some credible ones. Hire, like a mentor to help fast track your progress. Or, if you don't have the time to do that, but you do value this information and you would see it would benefit you, then possibly just reach out for a mentor and just hire them with a lot of experience. I would just recommend, in that case, the best predictor is going to be someone that has a tremendous amount of testimonials and proof that their product works. That's really the only thing you can kind of rely on for the most part. Degrees are great and everything, but they're not that telling of a person's competency, especially not telling about how much they care about their clients and not telling about how much they could actually communicate that information to their clients to be able to apply consistently in a real world situation. And the real world these days, unfortunately, doesn't value mental or physical health, or we wouldn't be in the position we are today as a country where 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically sick and close to 30% of Americans are some kind of psychiatric drug. And I think it was like 60 or 70% are some kind of medical drug, period, which is just so easy to avoid if you just master basic health principles, in my opinion. So just if you find someone, just make sure they have a laundry list of successful clients with varying challenges that have accomplished what you're trying to accomplish. And that doesn't mean for sure the program will work for you, but there's a much higher chance versus finding someone that has no testimonials, possibly just pictures of themselves, and then claiming like, oh, they've helped so many people. But I'm like, well, if you've helped, 1,000 people, how come I don't see any of these transformations on your website or stuff of that sort? Or maybe they have like 1 or 2 transformations and mostly pictures of themselves, or just degrees and diplomas. I'm like, well, if your stuff is working and you've been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, you should have a long laundry list of very successful clients. Where's that list? And if that list isn't there, that's a huge red flag. I would say maybe even if they're competent, they just don't know how to communicate that information to a client to be able to apply it properly in the real world, which doesn't benefit you at all. So once again, trendy diets, easy to fall into, they're tempting, but personally, if it were me, I would just educate myself heavily on nutrition and then customize my nutrition protocols to my specific needs, which also change, depending on your body dimensions and also your goals. That's huge. You must approach it this way if you want any lasting change. It's not gonna happen long term if you just fall into these, once again, symptom management, dumbed down nutritional approaches. It's just not going to happen. And look at a lot of your friends that have done these diets. I'm pretty sure many of them have done fasting. That one's popular. Look at them. Like maybe they lost a little bit of weight in the beginning, but overall, in the grand scheme of things, they look exactly the same. They're still very haggard, still worn out, still never dealt with any of the issues that led to the excess weight gain, which is their belief system, et cetera, et cetera. And it just doesn't work. I see extremely poor success rate with any trendy diets long term. There are great short-term benefits sometimes, and that's it. And then I see them always revert back. And once again, the statistics say 95% of people that start any fat loss program, no matter how much weight they lose, they end up regaining all of it, if not more, within 2 to 3 years, simply because they approach fat loss from a very symptom management approach of, I just got to change my diet and I just got to work out more. And most of the time when they say, I just got to change my diet, they just fall into these trend diets and stuff of that sort, okay? Now, not to put them down fully, there are some exceptions of where people fall into these trendy diets and they do lose weight and they're finally motivated. You know what I mean? That does happen maybe 1 out of every 10, 1 out of every 20 times, but then they educate themselves on how to do it properly and sustainably and get on more of an omnivore-ish type diet and then kind of customize the ratios to themselves depending on what they're looking for. The ratios being, how much fat, protein, and carbs they need at any given time of the year, depending on what programs they're on and what kind of goals they're on. So David mentioned, I hit a new low in my weight loss program this morning. Great to be working with you. Oh, thank you. I promise I don't pay David to come on these lives and build me up, okay? So David is a a good client of mine. I think we started about a month to a month and a half ago, and he started his honest journey of weight loss in a sustainable way, and I'm happy to be working with him and happy he decided to do it in an honest way, which a lot of people unfortunately don't. Okay, so trendy diets, I covered that one. Let me X these guys out. And if you guys have any questions, remember I'm here for you, so just shoot them my way. And I'll try to answer them, especially when I'm doing these solos. I typically don't answer questions when I have guests on because I like to have the focus on them. But if you guys have any questions while I'm doing a presentation, even if it's not too related to the topic, just shoot me a message and sometimes I don't have the answer, but if I do, I'll try my best to answer it. So, okay, so another big common problem a lot of people have is they rely too heavily on exercise instead of leaning more on diet and lifestyle changes. And this most often fails. You can't really, it's common, you hear this a million times, but it's true. You can't really outwork a bad diet, right? Especially for our topic today, a caloric surplus. If you're constantly, once again, eating more than you're burning, you'll always be losing weight. The only way to, you'll always be gaining weight. The only way to, once again, lose weight is to be in a caloric deficit. And especially if you're very busy, let's say working 40, 50 hours a week, and plus, let's say, have a kid or two, just the diet and lifestyle becomes so much more important because you can't, through basic time economics, you can't afford to be at the gym for 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. Sometimes people make it work, but I just don't think it's as sustainable, and you'll always generally feel very drained, tired, and beat down because your central nervous system can only take so much, and a 40-hour week in and of itself is already quite a bit of work and mileage on the central nervous system. And then if you throw in 2 to 3 hour tough workouts per day, 5 to 6 days a week, and plus you have a kid, and plus you're not sleeping that well maybe, all of a sudden you feel really run down really fast. And just constantly being on the go like that is also like a great way to age yourself very quickly. You notice like a lot of people that are just always on the go, always moving around, never really resting, they kind of generally look much older than they are. There are a couple of other variables that go into why that is, but the general idea is they're just not managing their central nervous system too well and just putting on way too many miles. And a lot of people get confused also with, like I coach a lot of engineers of various sorts, computer engineers, mechanical engineers, et cetera, and they're like, well, I like doing my work, so it should be okay that I'm working 50, 60, 70 hours a week sometimes. A lot of these engineers, especially in the bigger companies, might pull those hours no problem on a consistent basis. And the thing is, even if you like your work at the same time, you have this central nervous system that has evolved over 200,000 years, basically, give or take. And remember, there have been 28 plus human species that have come and gone. So really, it's around 2 million years that the human being has been evolving in its various forms. But if we just focus on the Homo sapien, it's been like 200,000 years. And the central nervous system has really evolved to deal really well with peak stresses followed by valleys of absolutely nothing, right? So you go hunting, it's stressful, and then a few months of literally nothing going on, or a few weeks rather, and then you go hunting again, it's kind of stressful, and then nothing going on. But today, you have macro stresses combined with a lot of micro stresses. So, you get on the freeway, it's stressful to drive. Actually, on the central nervous system, it's pretty stressful to even drive a car because it has to be really amped up so you don't veer off the road and stuff like that and cause a car accident. You also have to be very aware, especially on the freeway, because there are a bunch of cars moving back and forth and all that stuff. And, then you get to work, there are deadline after deadlines, maybe one annoying coworker or two, maybe the boss isn't cool. Also, stresses come from dietary choices too. A diet that's extremely high in omega-6 as compared to omega-3 is pretty stressful on the body as well. Drinking a lot of stimulants like coffee, infections, injuries, all of that stuff. Environmental pollution causes inflammation on the body and stress on the body as well. And then you go to lunch, you have not great food with your coworkers. That's going to cause a lot of inflammation too. You get back, some deadline, maybe an argument with a coworker, then you get back on the freeway, you're in traffic, then you get home, you might not be in an ideal relationship that you don't like anymore either. Maybe if it did serve even its purpose before, then you don't sleep well. You get what I'm saying. People these days, unfortunately, have a tremendous amount of macro stresses followed by also a combination of micro stresses, which is the worst possible scenario. So a lot of people are exposed to that. And even if you do have an ideal schedule and you love your schedule, you know, a 100-mile drive, whether you like it or not, is a 100-mile drive. So a person that drives 100 miles and doesn't like the ride, there's still the same roughly wear and tear on the tires, the brakes, the gas depletion as a person that drives 100 miles and does like the ride. You still got to slow down, pull over, get gas or whatever, fix your car from time to time and stuff of that sort. And what I'm referring to is having a lot more me time in your schedule. So definitely enough time to sleep like 8 hours a day for sure. An honest 8 hours a day. Ideally to take a 20-minute nap midday, most days out of the week, ideally every day. And get away from working 60 to 70 hours a week. Even 50 hours is pushing it. I would say for a lot of people and their central nervous system, everyone varies a little bit here and there. And there are unique specific occupation challenges as well. But 40 hours even is a bit pushing it. I mean, tribal societies, you hunt in the morning and then you just lay around all day, you know, do basically what you guys would probably do on your vacation 2 weeks out of the year. They just do that all year round, you know. They go fishing in the morning, let's say catch some fish, 2 hours later, 3 hours later, and that's it. You just hang out with your partner and hang out with your friends and then, you know, take a nap after the fishing trip maybe and then go hang out with your friends or watch some soccer game. And then, you know, you're in bed by like 8 or 9, you're ready to sleep. You know what I mean? The closer you get to that kind of schedule, the more at ease your central nervous system will be. And generally speaking, the more stress eating will disappear and just the more mental and physical challenges will disappear in your life as well. Once you get more in tuned with managing the central nervous system correctly. And more importantly, just being a human being. At the end of the day, the DNA isn't going to change that fast, you know, so whatever you're born with, you're stuck with. And there are certain natural rules you have to follow. And if you deviate from those rules, you will face health consequences. And if you're honestly okay with that, then there's nothing wrong with that. But if it's not something you want in your life, you just have to honestly approach that. And if you say you're okay with it and something happens in the future, don't be surprised. You know, that's all I'm saying. And don't play the victim card either. The bulk majority of any chronic issues experienced today, especially in our culture today, can be avoided through very simple lifestyle and nutritional modifications. Extremely simple too. So the point being on step 5 is relying too heavily on training and not changing their lifestyle and nutrition, not focusing too much energy on there. You can't outwork a bad diet and poor, unsustainable lifestyle, especially as you get into your older years, 40s, 50s, and 60s. For sure, you won't be able to do that. Then lifestyle and nutrition becomes exponentially more important. That's why it's important to start in your younger age so that when you get into your 40s, all those skills are put on automatic and you don't even have to think about it. It just happens instinctually. Omri, good to see you. Don, good to see you as well. Going to take a little break here. Get another sip. All those things happen automatically. It could happen in old age too. But what I found is if it happens then, it usually requires kind of like a life emergency, some kind of health scare or divorce or bankruptcy or something of that sort. But I'm hoping by making these videos, you guys can just avoid that and just start at a much younger age and actually live, be great looking and functional and healthy and full of energy into your older years as well, which is 100% doable. I mean, look at one of my mentors, Paul Chek, for example. I think he's like 63 now, very vital, still runs a very very successful business and institute. I think he has like a few locations in Australia, the UK, Canada, plus the US. Plus still has kids. Had I think 2 newborns just in the last few years and stuff of that sort. And still very in shape, great looking. His skin is great, etc., etc. And that is normal. That is how a person would normally look if they just, once again, really mastered a lot of these basic principles that I go over on these lives. It doesn't even need to be like quantum physics complicated. Look at my grandmother that raised me off grid, for example, in Ukraine. Although back then, for the most part, is the USSR. She lived to be 87 in full health, okay? And she never went to the doctors, and she was a lot healthier than pretty much all of the medical doctors I know here that have gone to school for God knows how long to learn about health and wellness, but for some reason she didn't go to any of that school and still lived to be 87 years old in full health without any health issues and attending to the ranch herself for the last decade or so of her life, etc. Still able to do it, okay? So just because that environment actually instinctually just makes you master the basic health principles that I'm talking about here without needing to actually have education on it. So it's easier than you guys think. And remember, with healthcare in the US especially, there's a lot of money in keeping you sick. If you actually become healthy and happy, you don't need a lot of those medical drugs. You don't need probably any of those medical drugs. And thus, or those procedures or whatever, if your spine is all messed up and you actually understand biomechanics, you don't need to go to the chiropractor anymore. And all of a sudden that health industry loses a tremendous amount of money. So it isn't in their best interest to actually get you a complete resolution of symptom ABC. It's in their best interest just to keep you alive and healthy enough to keep coming back for more treatment, okay? That's the only way the business can continue. So keep that in mind, okay? No one's going to help you but yourself. I highly recommend that you do become your own mechanic. But in order to do that, you really, once again, do have to go above and beyond just watching clips on TikTok and reading Yahoo articles. If you're on a budget, Amazon sells any used book basically for like $1 or $2, okay? Start there. Start reading 2 to 3 books a month. Average American spends $8,000 to $16,000 a year on non-essential expenses without even questioning it. And a lot of these non-essential expenses like alcohol, eating out with coworkers at lunch, just provide sugar highs at best. And they're totally okay with spending $8,000 to $16,000 a year on that and travel, but not okay with taking a health course that could, or hiring a mentor that could benefit them a tremendous amount every single day of their life. You know what I mean? Like imagine having a great looking body and great health and not needing to be on any medical drugs. You get to reap those benefits literally every single day. Where if you go to a trip to Europe, it's like $3,000 and then a week later you're back to, which might be cool for some pictures, but then a week later you're back to the exact environment that led to all your health issues and nothing has changed except you're out $3,000 or more dollars. It doesn't make any sense. And a lot of times people just fund their own pathology unknowingly. And if you kind of point this out to them, unfortunately, just a lot of people keep doing it anyways because they're not ready for change. But if you go, oh, shoot, yeah, he's right. You know, I looked over my finances and I am spending $8,000 to $16,000 a year on just BS. That money could be saved or invested in a different way for more residual income or invested in educational purposes to help with your health challenges if that's a concern for you and stuff of that sort. It's up to you to decide what's more important to you, but to me it seems obvious where that money could be better spent. Okay. So another big issue with losing weight is people have a poor resting metabolic rate, and that's mainly dependent on the level of muscle mass you have. So the reason I'm able to burn 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day just at rest, or with my current activity level of about 4 workouts a week for 45 minutes a session, is simply because I have a lot of muscle compared to the amount of fat I have. So the more muscle you have, the more calories you're going to burn at rest, and the more calories you burn doing activity if you are doing a lot of activity. So it's easier to get into that caloric deficit, much easier if you're able to burn like 4,000 calories at your resting metabolic rate versus 2,000 calories, because that way you're not so restricted. You know what I mean? And the more restricted you become, the less sustainable fat loss programs become. And it's also important to remember, no fat loss program is sustainable. Okay, some can be done longer than others, but the whole point of a fat loss program is to finish it and then transition ideally to like a lifestyle program, a maintenance program, or a lean muscle gain program where inevitably you will gain a little bit of body fat, but hopefully the majority of it, if done right, will be primarily muscle. Okay, so you're not supposed to be on a fat loss program forever. Some people need to be on it longer than others. The biggest determinant of that is how much body fat they need to lose. So if a person needs to lose 100 pounds, they need to be on it much longer than a person that needs to lose 20 pounds, for example. But in short, either of those subjects, the 100-pound weight loss individual and the 20-pound weight loss individual, shouldn't stay on a fat loss program forever. Okay? So keep that in mind. You're not supposed to stay on a fat loss program forever. Ideally, you want to be on a lifestyle or muscle gain program forever, especially if you're, 30s, 35. You want to try to put on as much muscle on your body as possible before you hit 50 for a couple of reasons. One, it is great anti-aging strategy, because the one thing that gets people to look very old very quickly is just a low muscle mass, and they kind of become like saggy or droopy a bit once they hit their 40s or 50s. But if you maintain that muscle, it keeps your body looking very young as well. And generally, if you're maintaining that muscle, you're also like eating well and sleeping well and stuff of that sort, which will have a positive ripple effect on your skin complexion, your hair, stuff of that sort. So you want to gain as much muscle ideally as possible before you hit 50. That way, when there's a natural decline, you're not losing the very little bit of muscle you have remaining. You have quite a bit of muscle, and then you're still looking muscular into your 60s and 70s and stuff of that sort, okay? So that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I encourage a lot of my clients to do as well. That's more of like a very long-term vision, but an important vision, especially if like your looks are important to you and you don't want to become looking too old as you get older in age, basically, okay? So in short, coming back to this here, one of the biggest downsides of people why they have trouble with fat loss programs is they have too little muscle mass. And they typically also do the fat loss portion incorrectly, and they lose quite a bit of muscle mass. And thus, when they get to their ideal weight, they look very kind of depleted. And their resting metabolism is very low. So the second they start eating anything more than, for example, 2,000 calories or whatever, 1,500 calories, whatever the person's caloric needs are, they start regaining weight very quickly. So that's one of the reasons. And one of the best ways to make a fat loss or a lean body sustainable long term is just to put on a lot of muscle, but inevitably you still have to adopt those healthy eating habits just indefinitely for the rest of your life. So for example, even if I were to eat out, which is fairly rare because it's impossible to eat healthy and eat out, it would be something like sushi or steak or some kind of whole food, not like the grocery store, but a single ingredient food, like chicken or something of that sort. And water. I never drink alcohol. The only liquids I drink are basically water and then 1 cup of organic coffee in the morning, and that's it. And inevitably, that's just what you're going to have to adapt. And that's not dieting. That is actually natural eating. It's just the way people are eating these days. The pathology of that has been normalized. That's why maybe if a person like me comes to you and says like, oh, I eat like elk, deer. For my sources of protein, I eat like elk, deer, wild boar that I hunt myself. It's easy to do that in my area. Grass-fed and grass-finished AGA certified beef and bison. For carbohydrates, I just have fruit and vegetables and some jasmine white rice. And then for the fats I get from the meats, but also I have some almonds and stuff of that sort, cashews and avocados. And then for my liquids, I just have water and coffee. And that seems super crazy, but that is actual ancestral natural eating. That is how everyone ate basically for the majority of the human race, okay? And that's why no one was overweight, or no one had any of these metabolic issues that a lot of people, that 9 out of 10 Americans these days are struggling with. And even if you look at the timeline of before 1950, there are rarely any overweight people in the US. So they're eating more of a whole food diet, basically, okay? Like real food. And by real food, I mean single ingredient food like steak, chicken, wild fish, turkey, vegetables, fruit, stuff of that sort. They weren't drinking calories either, which is a huge mistake a lot of people make in their fat loss journey. They have too many liquid calories from soda. A deceptive one is also cooking oils. Like a single tablespoon of olive oil is like 120, 130 calories. Imagine sprinkling like 2 of those on each meal. That's another 230 calories per meal. Times 3, you're looking at, what is that, 710 calories just from cooking oils every day. And a single pound of body fat is 3,500 calories. And because people are not very active these days either, it quickly puts them in that surplus, and thus why they gain weight. So all these little details are super important to consider, okay, and why a lot of people fail in their fat loss journey because they just don't consider it. And it's not because they're dumb or anything like that. It's just totally under the radar and they're just not aware of it. And then once you make a person more aware of it, they typically would do it. But once again, not always, especially if a person's riddled with a tremendous amount of self-sabotage. So another common mistake people make is they eat out during a fat loss journey. This is a slippery slope because once again, you don't know how much cooking oils they're using there. Like, for example, I use this with a lot of my clients. 1 pound of chicken breast is like 500 calories. Okay, let's say you go to a restaurant and you're like, I'm just going to order 1 pound of chicken breast. And it's going to be the same thing, but really is it? Because what kind of oils are they using in there? Let's say they use 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So now instead of 500 calories, it's all of a sudden 200 or 250 calories. And let's say they put some barbecue sauce on it, which has a tremendous amount of sugar. And now all of a sudden it's 800 to 900, maybe even 1,000 calories. There's some salads at Yard House that are like 1,400 calories, right, guys? And all of a sudden they're thinking like, oh, I'm eating the same chicken breast, but hey, this chicken breast at home is 500 calories. This chicken breast at the restaurant ABC is 1,000 calories. And the room for error for most people, because they do have low muscle mass and they're not that active, is very low. So the second they surpass that room for error, they instantly start gaining weight. So Randy has a question. Some have more difficult adding muscle. Can you speak to that? Yeah, I wouldn't say it's more. Of course, some people are more inclined to add muscle a little bit faster than others, but it's more over poor program design. Sometimes a person also with, depending on how muscular they are as well, it requires more rest and recovery. So sometimes their occupation doesn't actually allow them to be extremely muscular because you can't be working 60, 70 hours a week, still getting good workouts, still getting all your meals in and still being well rested and stuff of that sort and maintain a muscular physique naturally. Some people do the drug approach too. That's a slippery slope as well. If you do it through your doctor, it's okay, but then you have to find like a doctor that's more, I guess, what's the phrase, like more athletic minded, because if you just go to your normal physician, they're going to give you kind of inadequate doses, then you're not really going to see any change, stuff of that sort. And I would say I have trouble gaining muscle. Naturally, I look extremely malnourished and sick, but I'm still pretty muscular, and I'm 100% drug free my entire life. No steroids, hormones, no peptides, SARMs, really not even any supplements for the most part outside of a protein shake here and there, maybe some collagen and stuff of that sort. So I'm able to do it. You just have to have good program design and enough rest. Rest is super important. Rest includes more than just sleeping well. That means keeping toxic relationships out of your life, not working too much, just sitting in front of a computer has become common, but it's not normal, you know? And a lot of people can't accept that. So it's not going to be conducive to your muscle gain journey if you're in front of a computer 10 hours a day and then try to optimize or maximize your muscle mass and stuff of that sort. But it also depends, you know, a lot of times it's not what you do, it's how you do it. So there's that aspect too. Like for corporate workers, I think they do have some things on their side because they have structure and consistency in their schedule. So if they're really good with like packing their meals and bringing it with them and just eating all those meals at work and stuff of that sort, they could kind of figure out a way to make it work. I've been able to add muscle even at my age, so I agree with you. Yeah, so Randy is one of my former clients. I did an interview actually with him a while back. Honestly, his transformation even surprised me. I knew we were going to get him to where he wanted to go, but I didn't think he would look so ripped and muscular at the end as he did. So, and I think he did that at 59. Let me know if that's correct, Randy. He was like 59 or 60 years old. He's still able to gain a bit of muscle during a fat loss phase. And then we transitioned him to a muscle gain phase after that, et cetera, et cetera. So it is possible. It's a little bit harder than for some people than others, but I would say it's difficult for a lot of people because they have poor programming. They don't understand exercise science very well. They have an unsustainable lifestyle. They have like toxic relationships, toxic partnerships in their business and at home. They're, as you know, Randy spoke about this, 200 times over. Their diet is poor, even when they're saying they're eating healthy. I find that not true pretty much 99% of the time. When questioning them on, when I go like, okay, what's your definition of healthy eating? They're just like, oh, I follow this trendy diet, or I eat less, or something kind of silly of that sort, or I do fasting. And that is already a dead giveaway. They know nothing about nutrition or healthy eating whatsoever. But once again, falling under these easy to fall into marketing scams of nutrition approaches instead of customizing it to their needs, which requires more insight and knowledge and more time to invest to actually know how to do it. But I guarantee you, anyone with an impressive physique is doing it that way. They're not doing it through a trendy diet. They have a tremendous amount of education. Even if they don't have a degree, they know a lot about nutrition and exercise science and stuff of that sort. Or they wouldn't have that kind of physique if they knew nothing. And also they know, more importantly, how to apply it in a world that doesn't facilitate mental and physical health anymore. That's key, because that's what's most important. Knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is power. So the ones that could actually apply it is where the magic happens. And that's why I said, when you do find a practitioner or mentor, just make sure they have a lot of testimonials, successful testimonials, because it shows that they're able to apply that knowledge in a myriad of circumstances with a myriad of different people, with a myriad of different challenges, and still see it through. That's key, and that's a skill in and of itself, beyond just the skill of knowing the material. So eating out, that's a slippery slope. I find if people eat out even once or twice a week, for most, it holds them back from losing weight, even if they try to eat healthy. It's just, you don't know what you're getting in there. And once again, the room for error for most people, because their muscle mass is so low and their activity is almost non-existent in some cases, they just gain weight too quickly. Even if they try to make the best choice, it's just really tough to do that with the low quality of food, even experienced at high-end restaurants. I'm not going to call them out here, but even high-end restaurants that are selling steaks for like $100 to $150, they're just factory farm junk, very sick cattle type of steaks. You can see it by the amount of fat on these steaks, and they cook it with like a tremendous amount of butter and industrial seed oils and all that junk, and you're just paying, a 500, 600% markup for Costco level steaks, and that's it. That's all you're getting. So eating out, definitely a big mistake for people on a fat loss journey. I personally wouldn't do it. It would save you a tremendous amount of money by not doing it too. So another less common mistake is people just don't have enough intensity when they work out, mainly because they just don't have a game plan for their workouts. They don't have any kind of structured, periodized program. They're trying to maybe get this $100 program for some really drugged out fitness guru on Instagram that's not even pre-made for them. So first of all, when they say everything is customized to you, just know that for that statement to be true, they have to take you through a 2 to 3 hour assessment. That's roughly how long a proper assessment takes. If their assessment is a quick form that you fill out that takes like 5 minutes and you send in with your payment and then you get a plan like 5 to 10 minutes later, that is not a customized plan at all, okay? A proper assessment takes 2 to 3 hours minimum, if not more, depending on the person's needs. And if you don't know that person, you don't know what kind of advice to give them. And this is why a lot of people fail on these pre-made programs. Also, they just don't have the accountability, which is huge as well, and which is what most people actually need, at least in the initial portion of their journey. So sometimes they're just not working out well enough. They're also not on a well-developed periodized program, and thus they lose too much muscle during their fat loss journey, or they just don't see any results and they get discouraged and leave, which is understandable, because if I was doing something and putting in a lot of time and not getting any return on it, I would also quit, you know? And that's understandable. So just being on a well-developed periodized program is key. I have a lot of success with myself and my clients just doing undulating periodization. Like I mentioned here, Randy here is like 60. Joel is another one of my clients. I saw like some other people, Tim as well, Justin, and a few others here. That's key. Just going, once again, online, trying to copy your drugged out fitness influencer, it's not going to work for you. I know it's easy and it's tempting, but if it worked, you would have a great physique already, okay? And if you don't, then you got to change your approach, because more of the same is going to give you more of the same. And by just doing more of what doesn't work isn't going to all of a sudden make it work. That's just not how it works, unfortunately. So, okay. So let me flip over here. Let me get reloaded here with my drink. All right. So another big one is just most people just don't have a sustainable lifestyle. And that's it. They're just working way too much. They have way too many toxic relationships. From Robert Kiyosaki, I remember him on a podcast mentioning that the average American has like $1,000 to their name, or maybe even less. So they're not financially sustainable, which causes a lot of stress as well, and stuff of that sort. So if your lifestyle isn't sustainable, and that sets the foundation to all of your mental and physical health, then your program isn't going to be sustainable. End of story. You can't be like optimizing your gym workouts and being in a toxic relationship at the same time, whether that relationship is at work or at home. It's going to be very hard, because toxic relationships cloud your mind, your judgment. You can't focus in the gym, you can't focus in your workouts, and stuff of that sort, and a myriad of other variables of that sort. And just, once again, so important for people to realize that, dude, working 50, 60, 70 hours a week, week after week, is just going to wear you down. You should be resting as much as you're working, which no one is doing. And to make it even worse, the average American sleeps like 5 hours a day, which is terrible. Then you're in a constant fatigue state. You wonder, why you're looking 10 years older than you actually are, and stuff of that sort. Central nervous system management, how to do that, especially pivotal in the Western world, especially in America, which is a workaholic nation that drives on the philosophy like you need to be like everyone else, but better. That's their whole selling point. But the thing is, everyone else is very sick mentally and physically, so you don't want to be like them, but better versions of them. You want to just use them as an example of like what not to be, and that's what I do. I try to be the complete opposite of that, and it'll probably work better for you, because it's definitely not working for them at all, no matter what title they are at work or stuff of that sort. If you knew a lot of these people personally, you will see they're extremely miserable, empty people, and their appearance is kind of manifestations of that. So that's it. They have an unsustainable lifestyle, And if that's the case, then no amount of nutrition programs or workouts will help you long term. But they may help you short term in the sense of wake up and realize that this lifestyle is not sustainable and I need to get on a more sustainable lifestyle program that's more conducive to mental and physical health and stuff of that sort. So another big issue, we're getting kind of to the end here. Another big issue is, I kind of hinted at this in the beginning, is not seeing fat gain as a symptom. And fat gain is a symptom of poor lifestyle and nutritional choices, which is a symptom of a myriad of other issues that I covered on a lot of other podcasts. Also, you can check out my presentation at the Four Corners Festival this year, where I covered the etiology tree of fat gain, where it goes step by step of what actually leads to fat gain. And it all starts with a belief system that doesn't facilitate health conscious choices, and it leads to behaviors that lead to poor lifestyle and nutritional choices that lead to weight gain. And then once again, as Walensky would say, if you don't meet the problem at the level of the problem, and you don't change the person that's causing the problems, inevitably the problems keep coming back, you know? So try to get out of the mindset of dealing with the problem, instead deal with the person that's causing the problems, and then the problem in and of itself would disappear. All right. Yeah, and unfortunately, number 12, these days, mental and physical pathology has become totally normalized. And that's what keeps people from not changing also. Being on medical drugs, very overweight, very overworked, it's totally normal these days. And there's a person that may be on 2 medical drugs and very overweight, for example, but the guy next to him is on 9 medical drugs, 10 medical drugs, and 80 pounds overweight versus 20 pounds overweight. So compared to him, of course, subject A is doing a lot better, but in reality, both of them are doing very poorly. And I could tell you for sure, when I was doing corporate health lectures and just general health statistics in the US, especially in those environments, I mean, it's extremely hard to find a healthy person. And unfortunately, when you talk to a lot of them, a lot of the unhealthy people tell you they are healthy, when in fact they really are not. But it's just their standards have dropped so much because, in a way, I found that they had to develop forms of dissociation and numbing themselves out to be able to survive in that kind of environment. Because if they didn't do that, they'd simply quit, you know? And a lot of them are too afraid to quit and start their own thing or get another job that's more conducive to health and stuff of that sort. So in their mind, through cognitive dissonance, they just started reframing and changing their story and saying this is okay, when in fact it's not okay. And that's what kind of leads them into problems. And once you start doing that, unfortunately, it's like a swamp, kind of sucks you in until it's too late. And unfortunately, a lot of people have to wait for a life emergency to finally wake up, whether it be a stroke, heart attack, cancer, divorce, bankruptcy, all that stuff. Sucks that they have to wait that long. And I try my best, and other health professionals try their best to warn them, but unfortunately, just pathology has been normalized, and it is what it is. Okay, so I'm going to skip over a few of these things, guys. I got to take off, and I try to do a study session in like a coffee lounge on the weekends. I usually kind of pick a different coffee lounge and go study there for like 6 or 8 hours just to continue education and stuff. So I'm going to take off pretty soon. But one of the biggest reasons is for a lot of these forms of normalized pathologies is just at the end of the day, people just don't know who they are, right? And they just go off like social programming of various sorts. And how I see it is like, if you don't know who you are, you just don't know anything, you know? And if you don't know who you are, how do you know which jobs to get into, which relationships to get into, et cetera, et cetera? And if you get into the wrong jobs, the wrong relationships, you have to form maladaptive behavior to deal with that kind of misery and disconnect. And once that maladaptive behavior forms, you know, you get into poor lifestyle and nutritional choices, fat gain arises. In a lot of cases, maybe drug abuse arises or alcohol abuse. They're all symptoms of just a disconnect between not knowing who you are and just not living true to who you are. That's really the biggest problem where most people are challenged. And then they form all of these maladaptive behaviors. And instead of changing that, they focus on trendy diets, following a drugged out guru, online that's also equally lost, but happens to be using a lot of drugs and is working out, so you think they're not, stuff of that sort. And it's kind of like the blind leading the blind, basically. Okay, so you guys, I saw Joel popped in as well, Kenji also. So you guys, great to see everyone. Don, Omri, great to see everyone. Have a good weekend, and wishing you guys the best. And remember, always never allow the world to put your mental and physical health second. The second you do that, misery will always follow close behind, okay? All right, guys. Wishing you guys the best. Take care.